a sanctuary that was created due to a major scandal. Corruption that in the end resulted in the construction of a real masterpiece in Kyiv. The war that stopped the construction of a cult building for many years. The traditional old Ruthenian 6-pillar and 3-apsid building. 55 meters long and 30 meters wide, this structure is crowned with 7 domes. The height to the cross of the main dome is almost 50 meters. This is the St. Volodymyr Patriarchal Cathedral, which is considered to be the main sanctuary of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. While the church is made in the neo-Byzantine style, at the same time the architecture of the church contradicts Byzantine samples. The cathedral attracts with its history as well as with the painting inside, which are true masterpieces of art. The church symbolized triumph as well as ruined fates. Adrian Prahov, an art historian, archaeologist and art critic, came to Kyiv from the capital of the Russian Empire, St. Petersburg, and immediately plunged into research of Kyiv antiquities. From early in the morning till late at night, he spent time in the St. Sophia Cathedral, where he studied mosaics and frescoes, as well as in the Church of St. Cyril, where he could not take his eyes off the newly cleansed faces of painted angels. Soon after that, at the general meeting of the Archaeological Society, he was offered to continue the work on the ancient Cyril fresco painting and restoration works at the St. Sophia Cathedral. The professor accepted the offer and enthusiastically set to this work, where he performed it only during the summer holidays. Then, in 1882, he took on another project. It was a temple that was being built for 20 years. 1852, the Russian Empire, of which Ukraine was a part of at that time, continued preparations for the celebration of 900th anniversary of the baptism of Kievan Rus. Kyiv Metropolitan Philaret Amphitheatre was offered to consecrate a monument to Prince Volodymyr the Great, which was planned to be erected on Mikhailivsky Hill in Kyiv. But knowing the attitude of the baptizer of Kievan Rus towards idols, the Metropolitan refused to consecrate the monument because Volodymyr the Great fought against idols, rather than erected the monuments in their honor. So the Metropolitan proposed that it would be more rational to construct a temple in honor of Volodymyr the Great. And he did not come to consecrate the monument. Instead, he addressed Tsar Nicholas I with a request to approve the crowdfunding of the church. The Synod and the Emperor satisfied his request, and fundraising began. Philaret was the first who donated 7,000 rubles to build the church. It was about $500,000 at that time. The Kyiv-Pечерsk Lavra donated 1,000,000 bricks. During the first year, they collected more than 100,000 rubles in silver. The architect and academician Ivan Strom presented the project of the church based on the model of the Constantinople Sophia Church, a cathedral with 13 domes. Its cost estimate exceeded the raised sum of money by more than 7 times. The members of the building council addressed the Tsar with a request to allocate additional financing for building of the cathedral, but they were refused. The Tsar said such a monument of architecture belongs to the people, meaning that state money would not be allocated for its construction. The start of the construction was constantly delayed, but events occurring in the empire posed a serious threat to the campaign that was launched. In 1857, initiator of the project Philaret passed away, and the fundraising campaign was practically suspended after the defeat of Russia in the Crimean War in 1856 and due to the economic upheaval. Archbishop Isidor Nikolsky was named the successor of Metropolitan Philaret. He continued to patronize the construction of the church, although he was less active in this matter than his predecessor. The place of the construction of the church was changed when the new metropolitan was named. Initially, the land to build the St. Volodymyr Cathedral was allocated within the bounds of the Yaroslav city, which was not far from the ruins of the Golden Gates. In 1857, the new Tsar of Russia chose a location to build the cathedral. Having interest in the undertaking of his father Nicholas I, Alexander II ordered to build the cathedral on a wasteland between Bibikov Boulevard, present-day Taras Shevchenko Boulevard, and Fundukleyevska Street, today Bogdan Khmelnytsky Street. Isidor requested Kyiv Governor-General Ilarion Vasilchikov to allocate the land to construct the church near the University of St. Volodymyr. Some 3 years passed before a construction site was ready for the works. In the end, there were not enough funds to implement the project proposed by Ivan Strom. In 1861, taking into consideration the shortage of funds, the building committee entrusted architect Pavlo Sparrow to redesign the blueprint of Ivan Strom in order to cut expenditures. While not wishing to remake the project completely, the architect just removed some aisles. In doing so, he changed the cross-shaped base of the church and made the cathedral look like a so-called ship, and reduced the number of domes from 13 to 7. The new project led to the new Metropolitan Arseny Moskvin to issue a censure. He firmly believed that by skimping on money, they would not be able to build a magnificent new cathedral. So it took another 2 years to find funds for the construction of the cathedral and the contractor of the building. Sparrow refused to participate in this project, explaining his reason for refusal by the fact that he was overloaded with other work. So Alexander Beretti was appointed the new architect, who made the appropriate and opposite corrections in the design of the St. Volodymyr Cathedral, leaving the shape of the church almost unchanged, while at the same time increasing its size 1.5 times. On July 15, 1862, on the day of St. Volodymyr on Bibikov Boulevard, the construction of the cathedral by the design of Alexander Beretti has finally started. It seemed that all the misadventures of the church were in the past. But 4 years later, when construction of the church was nearly completed, the arches and domes of the St. Volodymyr Cathedral began to crack under their own weight. A technical committee of leading Kyiv architects was established. Strom was called from St. Petersburg. The committee found errors in the mathematical calculations, which caused the disaster. Beretti was dismissed and construction was suspended. Tsar Alexander II saved the church from oblivion. In 1875, carrying out the inspection of some objects in Kyiv, he decided to visit the St. Volodymyr Cathedral. After the Tsar saw the cathedral, he was shocked. Then, in his anger, he issued an order to complete the construction at any cost. As a matter of urgency, one of the most famous architects, Rudolf Bernhard, was called out from the capital of the empire. He made precise mathematical calculations of the loads on the walls and the arch coverings, and on this basis he proposed an ingenious technical solution to mending the cracks. Basically, he proposed the reinforcement of the core walls by building aisles and dams that would support them for many years. In June 1876, the construction works were renewed and were headed by the renowned Kyiv architect Volodymyr Nikolaev. He redesigned the side aisles, which gave the cathedral the look of an ancient Byzantine basilica. Inside, the church is divided into 3 aisles, the middle aisle and 2 aisles on the sides, which are also divided into 2 unequal parts. The aisles that are equal to the width of the internal aisles gave the church a round form. It is planned to build 5 church porches inside, 3 in the lower part and 2 in the choirs. But given that the church was intended to be constructed in the Byzantine style, it was decided to place one altar in the middle aisle, another altar in the right aisle, and the sacristy in the left aisle. and 2 altars, Olginsky and Borisoglebsky, were put in the choirs. But huge buttresses adjacent to the pillars are a clear division of the building into 2 floors by wide eaves, and the presence of symmetrical belfries on the western facade contravenes the exact reproduction of typical Byzantine patterns. In 1882, the story of the construction of the Volodymyr Cathedral finally came to an end after 20 years since the moment the foundation was laid, and 32 years since the moment that the decision was made and approved on the construction. That was at the same time when Adrian Prahov worked on the restoration of the St. Cyril and Sophia churches. So he took on this project with great pleasure and wanted to recreate ancient monumental traditions in the St. Volodymyr Cathedral to reveal the spiritual greatness of Kievan Rus in the murals. A new story begins with the end of the construction of the cathedral. Decoration works have started. Kyiv Church Archaeological Society announces a tender for decoration works. It took Prahov a whole year to develop an interior design project, but the committee did not like the design submitted for the competition. So the committee decides to involve architect Nikolaev in this process. The project submitted by him was much simpler than the expensive and intricate version of Prahov. But the latter enlists the support of the influential Minister of the Interior Affairs, Count Dmitry Tolstoy. So in 1885, the St. Petersburg Archaeological Society appointed Adrian Prahov as the chief head to implement the interior design project. The project submitted by Adrian Prahov foresaw the completion of the works in 2 years, with a total budget of 150,000 rubles. The professor planned to hire outstanding artists of that time in order to paint the cathedral. But some of the most respected and venerable painters of the Russian Empire refused Prahov's proposal. Polenev and Surikov also refused at the last moment. The matter with another well-known artist and old acquaintance of the head of the fresco project named Nikolai Ge was also on the verge of turning into a fiasco. The future art historian, archaeologist and art critic Adrian Prahov was born in 1846 in Belarus. His father died when Adrian was a young boy. So it turned out that he was brought up by his maternal uncles. It was them that he was obligated to for his good education that he received in St. Petersburg. In the capital, he made his career and made many outstanding people. Among them were Ukrainians Mykola Murashko, Ilya Repin, and Arhip Kuinji, and Russians Ivan Shishkin and Viktor Vasnetsov. The latter was offered to lead a group of artists that would paint the inner walls of the St. Volodymyr Cathedral. The first talks were held in Abramtsevo, in the Moscow region, where the large family of Vasnetsov lived in summer. Having experience in painting of the Abramtsevo Church of the Savior and epic canvases, the artist refused to work in Kyiv. He said, "You know, critics will say that my works are similar to Raphael or Murillo's paintings. Besides that, Vasnetsov would have had to put aside his work on the Three Bogatirs, a painting that he had been working on for nearly 10 years. Adrian Prahov returned to Kyiv with nothing, and Viktor Vasnetsov wrote a telegram to him. If Surikov refuses, leave this matter to me. According to the Ukrainian art historian, the author of the book The Volodymyr Cathedral, History, Architecture and Painting of the Cathedral in Kyiv, Dmytro Stepovic, money played a significant and even the main role in it, because a huge sum of money at that time was allocated for the painting of the Patriarchal Cathedral. In response, Vasnetsov received a telegram from Prahov. Come to Kyiv. The painter packed his bags and went to Kyiv, where he had never been before. There he saw the amazing round building of the Volodymyr Cathedral, frescoes of the St. Sophia Cathedral, and the Church of St. Cyril. The painter was so amazed by the cathedral that he decided to take on the work without any doubt. But first he went to Italy for a month. He visited Venice, Ravenna, Florence, Rome, Naples and Palermo. Vasnetsov was inspired by the masterpieces of outstanding artists of the Renaissance era: Michelangelo, Raphael, Veronese, Tintoretto and Titian. After that, he returned to Kyiv. The Vasnetsov family settled in a rented apartment near the Sofia Square. Viktor Vasnetsov headed a cohort of artists which agreed to work with him on painting of the St. Volodymyr Cathedral. 96 masters were involved to make the interior decor of the sanctuary. Among them were Mikhail Nestorov, the brothers Pavel and Alexander Svedomsky, Wilhelm Kotorbinsky, Mikhail Vrubel, a young talented painter of the Kyiv drawing school of Mykola Murashko, and a genial graduate of this school, Serhiy Kostenko. But to persuade Vaznetsov to lead the team of painters was only half the battle. The second main task was getting the approval of the church's archaeological committee that Vaznetsov was a worthy candidate for the job, based on the sketches that he made.